Okay, so let's get into this. When you're doing modern web development, especially using Node.js, right? Writing the code is just, well, part of the picture. There's often this really crucial stuff that happens before anything actually runs. Think of it like a prep phase. Super important for front-end assets, or if you're using really new language features, it's often called the build step. And within that step, there are kind of two main things we need to get our heads around today. Transpilers and build tools. Some people call them bundlers. We basically want to pull out the core idea here, why these tools matter so much for you and how development works now.
Yeah, it's actually pretty central to how things are done. I mean, take transpilers first. They're essentially language translators. They grab code you wrote, maybe in a newer version of JavaScript or even something like TypeScript, and they flip it into code that, say, older browsers or Node itself can understand easily.
Ah, okay. So they bridge that gap between the cutting-edge code you want to write and what can actually run everywhere.
Exactly that. You might be using like async await or arrow functions, the latest ECMAScript stuff. A transpiler, maybe something like Babel, takes that and turns it into older ES5 syntax. The stuff that just works. And another big one here is TypeScript.
Right. TypeScript, that adds the static typing onto JavaScript.
Yep, it's a superset, lets you add type hints, which is great for catching errors, makes code safer, easier to handle on big projects. The TypeScript compiler, TSC, that's the transpiler, it takes your .ts files, your typed code, and spits out plain old .js files.
Got it. So transpilers handle the language part, changing the code itself. What about the other piece?
Yeah.
The build tools or bundlers. What's their job after the code's maybe been transpiled?
Right. So build tools or bundlers, they take on a much broader set of tasks. It's not just about the language anymore. They're more about organizing, packaging, and optimizing your entire project. Think about all your files, JavaScript modules, CSS, maybe images, fonts. They process all that, maybe minify the code, compress images, and then bundle it all up into neat, optimized files ready to be shipped. They're the project packers, basically.
Okay, and we hear names like Webpack, Parcel, Rollup, S-Build. Those are the big players.
Yeah, those are some common ones. Webpack is known for being really powerful, very configurable. You see it a lot in complex apps with lots of different types of assets. Parcel aims for zero configuration. You just point it at your main file and it tries to figure out the rest. Pretty neat for getting started quickly. Rollup often gets picked for building libraries. It's really good at something called tree shaking.
Tree shaking.
Yeah, it means it looks at your code and removes anything you imported but didn't actually use. So you get smaller final bundles. And S-Build is newer, built with Go, and it's incredibly fast. They all have slightly different sweet spots, depends on what your project needs.
So let's connect this back to Node.js specifically. Why are these tools, particularly bundlers, so vital even when you think, hey, Node runs modern JavaScript anyway?
That's a good question because, yeah, Node itself is pretty up to date, but these tools are still key for a few reasons, especially if your Node app touches the front end or has, complex parts. First, using TypeScript on the back end with Node, increasingly common. You need TSC or similar to transpile that. Second, if your Node app serves a web front end, you definitely need build tools for all that client-side stuff, the JavaScript, CSS, images the browser needs. Optimizing that is crucial.
Right, for performance and loading times.
Yeah, exactly. And third, think about serverless functions, like AWS Lambda using Node. Package size and how fast the function starts up are critical there. Bundlers with good tree shaking can make a huge difference. They help minimize what you deploy.
Okay, so they handle a lot of the messy details of getting code ready for different places it needs to run.
Pretty much. They abstract away a lot of complexity in preparing code and assets, way beyond just running a single JS file.
All right, so let's kind of wrap this thought up. We've got transpilers handling language transformation, letting you use cool new features or types. And then build tools take over the packaging and optimization, bundling everything up efficiently for deployment, whether it's front-end assets served by Node or Node code itself. These are clearly essential today for managing big projects, using modern practices, and getting good performance. This brings us to a final thought for you to chew on. Given how much we rely on these automated build steps now, hiding away all the translation and packaging, what does that suggest about the trade-offs between, say, how productive we feel as developers versus maybe losing touch with how our code actually gets executed in the end? How does leaning on this whole pipeline affect our deeper understanding of the final product? Something to think about.